Hello there. I want to talk about the Blazers, specifically the last couple of trades and then this draft that just happened, and what the hell Joe Cronin is doing because it's pretty puzzling. So, we trade for Jrue Holiday again. Now, instead of from Milwaukee, it's from Worcester, and it's for Ant straight up, plus 2 second rounders. Adding the second rounders to Ant for Jrue just seems especially wild and bizarre because he's got a full year of life ahead of him before he even hits 26 or 27. Either way, he's still really young. He's either about to enter his prime or he just has entered his prime. So it's just weird and wild to me that that happened. And yes, technically he's an expiring contract. They have one more year in it, which is obviously part of the reason why I think Boston wanted him, is because A, he does add to their ability to stay somewhat relevant and competitive, and B, if they so desired, they can just let him walk next season. I don't think they will, but they might decide to do that because he's probably going to be paid even more than he was paid by us this last time on this contract, which I believe was 4 years, 100 flat. And now he's probably going to be more likely, 4 or 5 years and 140 to 180 million, which is just terrifying for somebody who's so one-dimensional and streaky at the one thing that he's good at. Either way, it's the expiring contract. That would be why they do that. Plus, again, he's young. They can stay relatively competitive. I get it. But why the 2 picks? I'll never, I don't think, be able to understand that. Like, it just doesn't make sense that you'd have to add 2 picks to Ant for the whole or the husk of the remains of a once elite Jrue Holiday. It just seems really bizarre. And I get, like, season before last, he had an elite year. Well, maybe not elite, but he had a great year. This last season, obviously, he kind of went back down again. And I mean, he's only 34, so he's not that old. He probably has, if he wants to, at least another 3 solid seasons out of him before he would probably start truly needing to retire. But when you start to break it down, because again, you do have to try to make sense of it. So you have to try to break it down. Here's what and this is truly what I think they're doing, is it's a two-pronged strategy with Jrue. So obviously the first and foremost, is we sent out a big contract, even though it is expiring. We don't want to obviously spend the money on somebody like that, considering he no longer really fits the timeline. He certainly doesn't fit with the current roster that we have. He doesn't fit with the play style that Chauncey wants. And I'm so glad we got somebody who plays like he does out, because I can't stand Ant in how he plays, including offensively. He drives me fucking ballistic, especially in clutch situations. He drives me even more ballistic and insane and angry on fucking defense because he just doesn't try and he just doesn't care and doesn't give a shit. And he's incompetent, literally incompetent defensively, and it hurts my soul. At least last season he finally fucking tried to give a shit and tried to try. He still failed at it miserably, but at least you could see the effort he finally gave for the first time in his fucking life. Defensively, I will give him credit for that. Either way, he still sucks. So, glad he's gone. So we send out the $30 million, which is good for us long term. Plus, we don't have to worry about re-signing him or anything like that. It gets rid of it, done. We don't have to worry about it. It's done and dusted. So, the second aspect, obviously, is the fact that now we're adding a guy who is not only a champion, so he has that experience, but a really renowned across the league, and has been for pretty much his entire career, but especially the last 5 to 6 years, he has been a renown across the league with like all players and even coaching staff as like the consummate professional and veteran presence, because that's just what he is. He's quiet, but he's like, even by leading by example on and off the court, he's a perfect player to have for a team as young as we are, especially with a young point guard like Scoot, who still clearly needs a mentor. He clearly needs help. He clearly needs a teacher and somebody to help guide him and develop, but that is still playing and still can play really well and pretty tough, so that way he can better learn from physical example and practicing with him and doing scrimmages and battling him, and obviously as a vocal leader and teacher as well. Those are all great things. As a locker room presence, he's going to be great. As a on-court presence and on the bench guy and veteran presence, he's going to be great and leader. So that's another angle of it. And then obviously, again, he's technically, you could argue, better than Ant because, well, he has a lot more skills than Ant does. and he's actually competent, and not just competent, he's considered like great, and at his best, he's considered elite defensively, which is phenomenal to have, especially on a team with full of now really good defensive players. Being just an elite defensive team, super hustle and heart heavy, all out effort, tenacious, relentless, physical, scrappy, like that is the team that we're building. And so Ant been more of a misfit, I should say, on this roster, especially going forward. Again, all the more reason to get rid of him, and all the more reason you bring in somebody like Jrue, who defensively is exactly that, and he knows how to run it both, half court and full court offenses. He's really good at playmaking in those situations. He's really good at decision making. He's very steady. He's very high IQ. He's a fantastic veteran to have in that way. So even if you start him over Scoot, which you can do, and maybe even start him over some games Shea, which you also can do, because he is capable of playing, at least for stints, at the shooting guard. Either way, that's fantastic. Bring him off the bench, doesn't matter, still fantastic. So there is a fair amount of reason that it's a positive and a boon to bring him on board. Now, that's also one of the two reasons we bring him in, is all this aspect if we keep him. However, the second reason why we would have brought him in, and I think this is actually the primary reason, especially after the trades we made today and then who we drafted, I think seals the deal. That it all but guarantees that Joe Cronin's primary purpose for bringing Jrue in is to use him as a trade sweetener or trade bait, depending on how you want to see it. Because nobody's going to want to take Jeremiah Grant's contract, right? Nobody's going to even, they're going to fucking laugh you out of existence if you even dare to see if they want to trade for JG this offseason, especially, and going into next season. Because not only is his contract was egregious the year that we traded Dame, when we re-signed him for the 4-year, $150 million deal, which is insultingly bad. Nobody's taking that contract with JG. They wouldn't laugh at it, but because of the year he had last season, holy shit, you're not only gonna laugh because you think it's a fucking comedy and like, what a joke of a GM you are. You think I'd take on that fucking contract with that guy who had that bad of a year, like historically bad of a year, it feels like. Maybe it wasn't historic, but it sure as hell feels like it. It was atrocious and abysmal at a galactic level for JG last year. And that makes it almost, if not literally impossible, to trade his damn contract. And we need him gone. We need him gone, obviously, when we re-signed him. But now, we've really shot ourselves we've Barney Fifed ourselves, not just in the foot, but in the dick. We've shot ourselves in the foot and the dick, because what the fuck are we doing now? Like, now that he had a horrible season. And so, again, I think that's the element that's key here with Jrue, is I think that is what Joe Cronin is doing with bringing him in. I think that's his primary purpose for bringing in and trading for Jrue, is to use him as trade bait, to sweeten the pot in a deal to try to offload a contract like JG's onto, hopefully, in their eyes, either a contender or somebody at the very least who is trying to enter into the contention spectrum. So Jrue, I don't think is actually supposed to be here. I think that Joe Cronin's whole angle is, I'm trying to trade you. I only traded for you here so that we can then add you to a trade later, before the season starts, so that we can get rid of JG or DA. Now, obviously, the only two guys that it's going to be for to get rid of and help a team be willing to actually trade for them and their massive contracts is going to be DeAndre Ayton, the menace of the Outback Steakhouse, DA himself, or, of course, JG. Because they're the only two massive contracts we have left, and obviously Ant was always going to be overrated, and he always has been overrated, so naturally he was never going to be difficult to move. JG and DA are going to be the most difficult to move, especially with their sides of the contracts, they keep saying, right? And then again, like I said, JG's abysmal year. And DA's reputation. So, and I hate that DA has that reputation. I think it's just, you have to find the right coach, the right scheme, and the right team, and then build kind of around DA. And then that allows DA to play at his best. I really believe that. I don't think is that he's a bad player, he's a bust. I really think it's just that he's unfortunately that kind of player that you have to build around. Point is, I don't think he deserves the amount of shit that he gets. I really don't. But either way, he's, because of his negative reputation around the league, he's going to be, in his, again, the side of his contract, even though it's also expiring, he's going to be difficult to move to, I think. And so obviously, either when you're going to try to move, Jrue's to sweeten the pot. Now, obviously, you account for the draft day, the 25th of June's, trades, and now it makes a little bit more sense. It seems to bolster that theory a little bit, because you now have acquired the 2028 first round pick that is originally of the Orlando Tragic. And you are therefore now, no doubt, going to try to add that as well. The reason why we would grab that, especially with our timeline, right, is it's blatantly to sweeten the pot further, to trade out one of those two guys, one of those two contracts, and get a team to be willing to take their contracts on. So it's Jrue Holiday and that pick, I guarantee, are the two things that they're going to try to use in a trade of either DA or JG. And if I had to place my bets, despite the fact in the draft today, we drafted a center out of China in Hansen Yang. So technically, we have 5 centers. We have Donovan, DA, Throb Schwillems, Duop Shua, Hansen Yang now. So, ultimately, I think that though that's the case, and so most people are speculating, and in fact they're very confident that it's because they're going to try to use Jrue and or that 2028 first round pick from the Tragic to sweeten the pot and get DA off the roster. I actually believe it's more likely to be to get JG's contract off the roster. Again, especially considering DA is on an expiring deal. So yeah, I guess he is about to turn 27. So like, now that I think about it, I guess, like if he was 25 turning 26, that would make more sense. Or if he had like most of his year before he turned 27, I would try to be a little bit more in favor of like saying I would like to keep him. I think that ultimately though, it is probably JG that they're trying to sweeten the pot for. I don't think that it's going to be DA at all, because I feel like there's still probably some, despite his reputation, I still think that DA has better interest than JG, especially considering, again, he's on an expiring contract. So that would be my guess, is that they're trying to do it for getting JG out of here, especially considering he has, I believe, at least 2 more years on that contract extension, if not 3. But yeah, so it doesn't matter either way, because obviously if they cannot succeed in offloading the JG or the DA contract with Jrue sweetening the pot, and or likelihood is, and if obviously the Jrue isn't enough to a team that they're trying to entice to take on those contracts, or contract, I should say, one of them, then obviously that 2028 first round pick from Orlando is also going to be added to that equation to try to make it work better, basically entice them or like push them over the edge to actually accept it. If that doesn't work, then we're stuck with both JG and DA, which is technically long term, I think, okay, hopefully. But then you also have Jrue, and again, it doesn't matter, because I think that's the two-pronged aspect of Jrue, is he's great either way. He's great as a trade pot sweetener, or if that doesn't work out, we are stuck with him. That's cool too, because he's perfect as a veteran presence, as a leader, and that's on and off the court, as a vocal leader, as a leading by example kind of guy on and off the court, obviously as a mentor and as a teacher, especially to Scoot Henderson and secondarily to Shea. So I actually genuinely believe that that's the ultimate angle of Joe Cronin when acquiring Jrue. But if a trade like that doesn't work out and we're stuck with all these guys anyway, then this is a clusterfuck. It's not good either, because we need to get JG out of here. It's just a fact, especially considering, again, we have way too many fucking forwards, and especially tweeners. Even if we don't re-sign Bari and he's gone this offseason, which I would hate to have happen, because I really like Bari. I love that he's truly a manimal. He's like a Kenneth Faried type of guy, where he eats boards despite being 6'7" and a scrawny dude, and he's relentless in that regard, and he's always trying to, defend and at least do a little bit of something on the offensive end for us. and he doesn't need the ball in his hands to feel confident enough to try to get buckets when he's open or available. And I love that about him because he's a perfect kind of role player. And again, he's also a great energy guy. He's like Jeff Pendergraph in that aspect, or Ayers, where he's an energizer bunny. He's the guy who, like, even if he's sitting on the bench, he really motivates and energizes guys. But even more so once he gets on the court, he fires the rest of the team up. He gets them really motivated. He gets them feeling a lot more energetic again, energized. And then they come out and then they do a lot better because that's just the kind of impact that he has. And I sincerely believe every single team needs that. So having him, especially keeping him on a cheap contract, I think is a good thing and not great to just let him walk or be signed by somebody else and does not take him on. I understand, again, the depth issue is a problem, the conflict at positions is a problem, but like, if I had to choose between JG and Bari, yeah, I'm choosing fucking Bari every time. So considering he's a lot cheaper, and again, he does have he has a more in-depth and positive impact on the team than JG does. JG's just kind of there. I feel like, he's almost like a bench ornament at this point. I feel like who's there to eat time for no particular reason and try to do the same offensive moves every single time. And it's just like, he's got to go. But yeah, I mean, having 5 centers is brutal. And I'm going to end with this, is that I feel like JG or Rob, I actually feel like Rob is the guy they're going to try to trade because, again, even though Rob, I think, is actually slightly younger than DA by a few months. And again, he is more defensive specialist, whereas DA is a little bit more offensive. I do believe that DA's energy and his overall play style on both ends, and what he can do when he's on and he's confident and he's being aggressive, and his guys are backing him up like that, and so he's getting fired up, is more valuable than what Rob can give us. Well, again, Rob is a lot easier to trade because he has a much smaller contract. And I think his is actually now entered his final year as well. I think it's expiring. So, like, again, I think it's a perfect opportunity to be able to trade him. And a lot of teams, again, even with his injury issues, they're going to want him. He has a much cheaper contract. I think it's expiring as well. So that makes it even easier to take him on if somebody wants him. And then on top of that, you get rid of an injury prone guy. You free up a little bit more minutes for a 3-center rotation. A 3-center rotation obviously is going to be Donovan Clingan, Menace of the Outback Steakhouse, and DA, and then obviously Duop Chua. And so now you have your 3-center rotation, rip roaring and ready to go. And Hansen Yang, I think, is going to be more like a Rip City Remix kind of guy. I think they're going to have him down there in the G League at the Child Center. I always want to call it Chili Center. Child Center at the University of Portland, St. John's. And they're going to be developing him there, I think, more than anything. And then, if by near the end of the year, whether they trade DA or not, or they still have their 3-center rotation, if either we're doing a lot worse than they expect or a lot better than we expect, then I actually would not be surprised to see them call him up from the G League in like early March and try to give him a little bit of run and like some garbage time, 6 minutes at the end of games through March at least, if not also the end of the season through April. I think that would be their goal, I think, is that they give him a little bit of extra run. Especially considering Duop, I think, is 27. No, I think, he's 28. He's 28 now. He had his birthday recently. He's 28. So, I mean, like, Duop's pretty old. He's a stretch big, and he's on a dirt cheap contract. So, I actually wouldn't be surprised if some other teams, including contenders, actually wouldn't mind him as a second or third string backup big man. So he actually could be on the trade block too. And then you might free up some more time for Hansen Yang. In fact, actually, that would be very interesting, and I wouldn't put it past the Blazers to try that out, actually, especially Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups and kind of how they're refocusing the kind of the roster building and the way they're playing everything, including playstyle. I actually think, now that I think about it, that isn't too far off odds that by the trade deadline this year, Duop would be traded out. So that they can free up even more rotational space so that now they have a 2-center rotation, meaning that by the trade deadline, Hansen Yang might actually be called up, and then he might actually finally get some run time. And the reason why I say that is because Hansen Yang is a very curious and interesting situation. Because, again, why would you take a reach and pick 16, pick a guy who was on average projected to go somewhere between 36th and like the 40th pick? Why do that? Like, the only reason why a team would go that early on that projected late of a guy, by I mean everybody, the highest was literally 30th. Half the first round was still there, and the highest prediction was number 30, and that was notably higher than anybody else had him projections. The only reason why I can imagine that that would be the case, and I think that's true for any team, but especially Joe Cronin team, which it feels like there's a bit of a track record there and a reputation there, is he likes these kinds of guys. I mean, this is why you have a Tumani. You trade for him, and you give him immediate impact minutes because you know you love what you have seen. And you're like, we've seen the shit that nobody else has, and we see the potential that nobody else has, and we see the motor, right? The motivation and the work ethic that nobody else seems to have, giving them credit for it. So we'll take that because we know that we're going to get them for basically nothing, or as a throw-in, because nobody gives a fuck about them in this league, but we do because we've seen what they can do. And we know, like, they've said all the right things, they've shown that they really mean what they've said. You know, that they are relentless, that they are driven, that they are constantly trying to expand their game, constantly getting better, that nothing's going to be good enough, basically. They're going to always be expanding and adding. That seems to be the track record thus far. And so that's why I think that they would make that kind of a jump and a reach. Way, like, it shocked pretty much everybody, right? But for me, I wasn't even shocked by it. I'm like, okay, that is interesting. And then you just start thinking about it, and you're using logic with it, and you're like, actually, I could see why they would do this. And it's because, obviously, again, because we also worked out Hansen Yang, actually. They obviously guaranteed they adored whatever the hell that they saw, and also they were told and they heard from him in his camp during that workout session in Tualatin. But on top of that, obviously they're also going to love what they saw at the combine, because again, he rose from basically being undrafted in projections to almost to the top of the, well, I guess it is to the top of the second round with everybody, because again, everybody really was stunned and loved what they saw, including the 5-on-5s at the combine, which is, by the way, why as a prospect you want to do the 5-on-5s, because you want to really prove to not just yourself, but to everybody else out there, especially scouts, that you are way higher value and more skilled than anyone's giving you credit for. And that you really do have a lot of skills and capabilities already off the bat. So he rose because of that as well. So if you loved that and you adored what you saw in the workouts and heard from him in his camp in Tualatin during your workouts with him, and maybe again scouting overseas in China, looking at Qingdao, that's where he came from and got drafted from, and that was the team he played for there in the CBA, then you have all this background and you're like, okay, I love this guy and I love this pick, and he is, we've seen the shit that nobody else has. We have heard all the right things, and we believe that this is our right guy. Like, this is not a reach. And I think that that's what happened there, and that's why they took him. And again, also not just that, but again, knowing that they're going to move at least either DA and or probably it's just or Rob Williams. And then that way they can let Duop run his contract out, you know, play however he plays as the third string center this coming season, and then you have him in the G League in the remix, and then by trade deadline / March, you're going to start to slowly give him some garbage time minutes and really slowly start to increase his runs and opportunities with the actual team up top. And I actually would not put it past them that that's actually kind of their intent, is that by, again, like I said, the trade deadline this coming season, that Duop is gone and Hansen takes his place. Because you don't draft that high with somebody like that unless everything was just spot on and beautiful. And so you're like, okay, we know we can play him now, at least as a third string guy, and he can develop into something really good. And so that's the only reason why you do that. So that's why I say that, is in the long form, this is what I can see happening, and I wouldn't put it past it. I wouldn't discount it as happening. I think it's actually somewhat likely that could happen, and that's how that whole thing transpires, and that's why they took him at 16. But But yeah, and then technically I could mention also what some other people have, which is that when you think about teams in similar positions to the Blazers right now, in terms of records and improvements and how their roster is and kind of a half rebuild, this is akin, including drafting another center back to back. This is akin to what the Denver Nuggets did with Yusuf Nurkic and Nikola Jokic, except instead of back-to-back drafts, they took them back-to-back in the same draft. The draft aspect is because Donovan and him, and they're both really high potential guys. So I think that that's exactly what has happened here, and I think that's also probably part of the angle of Joe Cronin as well. Is like, let's try to kind of do something similar to what Denver did with Yusuf and Nikola, and prove that it can work, that you can take two centers at once and or in back-to-back drafts high and develop them together and actually find out who's the better player and who's the long-term prospect that we're going to actually make into our cornerstone center. I think that could be part of the angle there as well. Okay, anyway, that's enough blabbing for me. That was my thoughts on these moves thus far from Joe Cronin over the last 48 hours and why I think he made them. And we'll see in, well, 1 to 2 years, truly, ultimately, how right or potentially wrong I was. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you in whatever the fuck my next video is going to be. Okay. I'm going to go eat an entire Max Train without any milk. Just a lot of depression and probably some non-consensual methamphetamine injections. Okay, bye-bye. Official DeAndreAyton.com. What? Wait a minute. He has his own webpage? Oh, okay. I didn't know that. What is with fucking athletes and their Rolexes, bro? I don't understand that. It's just like nothing but fucking merchandise. Sorry, I'm just very distracted right now. Interesting. Anyway, sorry, I got very incredibly distracted there for a minute. Okay. Very tentative as I just got distracted by a shiny thing.